Thank you for watching today's Critical Thought, your daily bite-sized discussion of game design, courtesy of GameWisdom.com. Hello everybody, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. We're going to be talking about cheap difficulty design. But first, a few things. Unfortunately, my little board that's up there, the marker ran out, so I MacGyvered a solution. We're going to show the number of subscribers up there. So, thank you to 714 subscribers here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel. I hope you're enjoying the content here. And be sure to vote for the next Let's Play you would like to see. The voting ends Sunday, October 2nd at midnight. Check out the 700 subscriber Critical Thought for more information. For today's post, as we said, it's talking about cheap difficulty, and it's one of those very abstract and more philosophical terms. Difficulty is a subjective element. Some games and challenges we can get through very easily, and then there are some that we are stuck at for hours and hours on end. When it comes to cheap difficulty, it can sometimes feel like you're fighting a giant dragon monster half naked with a club, which incidentally, that game, of course, Dark Souls 3, is not an example of cheap difficulty in my opinion, but we'll come back to that in a few minutes. When it comes to defining if a difficulty is cheap or not, I tend to look at several criteria. And important to note, these criteria by themselves aren't bad or damning. Many games are built around them to begin with. But when all of them or most of them are presented in a single game's design, it usually spells frustration. The first one is, how many options are there to get past a specific challenge? What this means is the number of means. Whether it's using different kinds of weapons in a Souls game, stealth versus pure combat in an action game, improving your abilities, stuff like that. Essentially, if there's multiple means around a single challenge, that is often a good sign. Because if plan A doesn't work, you can do plan B. And sometimes some actions are easier for other players. Someone who sucks at stealth may be able to get by through pure combat. Or someone who is bad at combat but a master of stealth can go this way. It's one of the things that we saw with the remake of Deus Ex Human Revolution and how they added in non-violent alternatives for the boss fights. But typically speaking, more options the better. The second example is, what am I supposed to do? What is the solution to this challenge? And this basically represents what exactly is this player supposed to be doing? Many games can make things extra difficult by forcing the player to do different elements. It could be as simple as learning the perfect run in a Super Meat Boy level, grinding levels in an RPG, or just learning the pattern and growing as a player in a Souls game or Devil May Cry or anything like that. The important thing is that there should be something for the player to grow. There should be some way for them to get past this challenge. A major frustration and one of my big nitpicks I have with a lot of games is what I've dubbed strategy guide game design. What this means is that the solution or the option to get through a challenge is never referenced in-game at all. The only way to get through it is you need to look this up, whether it's on a wiki or strategy guide. A famous example for me would be Final Fantasy, I want to say 13? It could be 11. One of the non-traditional Final Fantasy. Again, they've made so many, it's sometimes hard to keep track. And what they did in that game is, there is an uber weapon that you can find, but the only way to get it is you need to open up specific treasure chests in a specific order that is never alluded to or referenced anywhere in game. Literally, the only way you will know that this exists is if you bought the Bradley Guides or Bradley Games Strategy Guide, or you looked it up on GameFAQs. That to me is a big example of bad design. I'm fine with challenge, I'm fine with hiding stuff if the player has some means of finding it out in game. Now, there are some unusual exceptions to this. Games that are built around like a communal aspect, such as Terraria or Minecraft, or even something mysterious like PT, where it is about, this very hidden mystery that hundreds and hundreds of players are supposed to come together and solve on their own. These are obvious exceptions, but in a traditional game, if it's in the game, you have to give the player some measurement, some means of figuring it out. Now the third point, and this is the one that really kills a lot of games for me personally, is the punishment or gamer tax associated with the challenge. Excuse me. What this means is, if I fail, what is at stake? Am I losing progress? In a game like Super Meat Boy, while it is built around perfect run gameplay, the penalty for failure is negligible. I die, I can immediately restart. Die, repeat, etc. And I can do this as many times as I want. The game's never going to kick me out to the main menu or say you have to replay the world. In other games, like the Soul series, failure is punishing in the sense that you lose your souls, but in the grand scheme of things, that really doesn't matter. As you play a Souls game, you're always making progress in some area, whether it's better refinement of your skills, learning the combos or the boss patterns, and even just saving up money or souls for either a higher level or buying something. Basically, you're always going to be doing something or learning something in a Souls game. So you're essentially always moving forward, whether it's by inches or miles. Where things become very frustrating is when the penalties come in, when it's not as simple as just hitting restart. When if you lose, you are going to be pushed back and you're going to lose progress. And losing progress is one of the major no-nos, I think, for game development. The player should always feel like there is some kind of progress. If they just felt that they lost 2 to 3 hours of progress because of your game, chances are they're not going to want to do that again. And the gamer tax associated with that can be seen in many different titles. I have 2 examples I want to bring up. The first one is from Shiren the Wanderer, which is a roguelike. The main quest of the game is built around starting from zero and going through and being bounced from start to finish. You can store items in the storehouses in the world to give you advantages and make subsequent runs easier. But the game, for the most part, if you know what you're doing, you can start from the start here and get all the way to the end with a level 0 character, and that's good. The problem comes in with the optional dungeons. The optional dungeons start enemies up at a far higher level than the normal game, and the only way you're going to have a chance at winning is to do grinding and leveling up gear and weapons before you try these dungeons. And remember, because this is a roguelike, when you die, you lose everything. So what happens is you could spend 5 to 10 hours grinding gear, grinding equipment to hopefully get through it, die in 20 minutes, and all that time spent grinding is gone. It's completely wasted. You're never going to get that back. And that can be very frustrating. Now, to be fair, that is an optional challenge. My main example, and the one that may be a little controversial, is the Darkest Dungeon. And before we get into this example, this is going to be a spoiler alert for those of you who are just starting the game for the first time. Please keep that in mind. The final dungeon of the Darkest Dungeon, aptly titled The Darkest Dungeon, changes the rules of the game from the other dungeons and the other quests. The Darkest Dungeon is built on 4 levels that are hard-coded. That means the map never changes, all enemy placements are preset, boss fights are going to be the same. Each level is designed around a different task or a different test on the player. The first one is heavy on stress-inducing skills designed to overwhelm your party and cause some heart attacks. The second one has to do with a special item that you get from the first quest. Here's where things get very nasty. You literally only have one shot per party in the darkest dungeon. And here's why. If you have to retreat, one character will always be left behind sort of to cover the group and will die. Doesn't matter anything about that character, doesn't matter how well you played. If you retreat, someone dies. The other point, once you beat a level with the darkest dungeon, those 4 or how many heroes who survived, they become so scarred by it that they will never enter the darkest dungeon again. They can be used to train up other characters, which is good, but essentially you are losing progress. And this is where that gamer tax comes into play. If I lose a darkest dungeon run, not only do I have the time spent in the dungeon completely wasted, but the characters and all the time I spent leveling them up, all the money I spent on, locking in good quirks, removing bad quirks, and upgrading all their gear is completely gone. I have lost progress. And when that happens, and when you combine with the other points, it becomes very frustrating and I think borderline cheap. And with the darkest dungeon, again, the levels are preset, so there is no alternate means of getting through this. I know what the boss fight is, or the major fight is, for each floor. There are no other means of progression either, because your level locks at, I believe, level 5. No, I'm sorry, I think it locks at level 6, but your gear ends at level 5. The enemies are considered level 6, so there's no more means of progression, no more trinkets that I can find. There's a limit on them. So it's essentially, I'm going to be going through this, and even if I plan things accordingly, RNG can still screw me. A few bad crits at the start of a darkest dungeon level can screw you over. And again, if you try and retreat, you lose a person. So what happens, and similar to Sharon the Wanderer, is I could spend 3 to 4 hours getting a party ready, and then have all that time gone in 5 to 10 minutes of play. And when you have to repeat that over and over again, and that tax just keeps growing, it becomes all the more frustrating, and I think cheap. Now, here's an example that I want to ask you folks about. I want to get your thoughts on. FTL has a very similar endgame. The final boss is a preset fight with a ship that has essentially 3 stages. So you kill the first stage, the ship transforms Transformer style into stage 2. Kill that, stage 3. Excuse me. The stages themselves are, again, hard-coded. I know exactly what stage 2 is. I know what exactly stage 3 is. What that means is that there is a very specific number or group of equipment and modules that I need in order to win at this fight. If I don't get them, I'm screwed. Doesn't matter how well I've played, doesn't matter how leveled my crew are, doesn't even matter if the game was easy or hard. If I don't get this gear, I'm not going to win this fight. Now, there are some ways to mitigate this, such as being able to kill all the crew members except for one, taking out modules, etc. But for the most part, you need to have these equipment and these plans in place. If you don't, you're not going to win. And again, when difficulty feels like you're not making progress and you're just literally banging your head against the wall hoping that it will break, that's where I feel difficulty can be a little cheap. But again, talking about difficulty in game design is a very subjective and sometimes philosophical topic. There are some games that I've played that I find easy that other people find impossible. For instance, Ninja Gaiden Black, I can't play that game on normal anymore because I find it too boring. But I gave it to friends who could literally not get past that first stage. And with the Souls games, for instance, Souls is a really good example of, it's challenging, but I always find it fair. Because it's always about you growing and adapting as a player. So it's not just about one way to beat a boss, or having to, do a lot of crazy stuff. Players who become skilled enough at a Souls game can basically adapt to anything the game throws at them. And even if they do get stuck at a fight like Nameless King or Champion Gundyr, once you learn those fights and you improve, you can win. Basically, there's always an out. The game doesn't essentially, say you cannot go past soul level 50 for a fight. Or it doesn't punish you in the sense of saying you die, you lose a soul level. Instead, death is quick, but there's no real punishment. The fights may be difficult, but you can adapt and grow to get around them. And that's why the Souls games are highly regarded for their game design and balance. But we are pretty much getting late here for today's Critical Thought. I still got to finish the Perceptive podcast for this week, so I'm going to wrap things up here. Like I said, thank you to 714 subscribers. When we hit 800, I have another reward plan. Be sure to go to the 700 subscriber reward video, and you can vote on the Let's Play. And one last thing before I go. If you missed this week's Game Wisdom Live, we did it very late in the evening, and I think that was a good lesson in what not to do. So I'm going to be moving things up, and again, if you have any suggestions for time or day of doing it, please let me know in the comments, as again, a lot of this stuff is me figuring out as we go along. But it's time to wrap it up here. So once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Thanks for watching today's Critical Thought. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for more great videos and another thought here on GameWisdom.com, the YouTube channel. Anyway, have a great rest of Friday. Take care. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. Check out Game-Wisdom.com, where I examine the art and science of games. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter under GW Bycer for the latest updates of new content. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under Game Wisdom if you would like to donate and help contribute to keeping Game Wisdom going. Your donations can not only give us the monthly funding we need to keep supporting ourselves, but if we can hit some goals, it will mean more great content for you, and there are some nifty little rewards there as well. Thanks for watching this video, and be sure to tune into the next one real soon.